Can reach it. Do you need? No need of mic.
Yeah, my speaks.
Okay.
The session chair would be Dr. Hari Krishna Mohta from BITS Pilani. I request sir to please
Where I
come
should
to
stand?
stage and proceed with
You guys should be here. You guys should be here. No? Call this. I have to introduce. No? Huh? You should be stand here. He will come, sir. What's your college name?
Indian Institute of Technology,
You're from which place?
Bangalore.
You know Telugu? No. Kannada.
Actually, we are Telugu. I don't know this.
Okay.
Do you want to?
Yeah. You're doing here PhD. Yeah, BA next time. No. NIT Surat. Yeah.
If he is not present, we can proceed with the second speaker, Devashish Nayak, Ashutosh Agarwal, Janaki Raman, Subramanyam, and Nikhil R. So, Devashish is here? Yeah. So, you can present. How much time? Speakers are requested to stick to 15 minutes, and then maybe question and answer will be for 5 minutes. You can start.
Yeah. Good afternoon, sir, and my dear friends. I am Janaki Raman, and he's Devashish, Nikhila, and Ashutosh. So our team, we work on batteries. So and today we'll be introducing ancient Indian battery. So just go. So basically, batteries, we all know that in the current. So we all know that in the current scenario, how batteries play a very important role. So and yeah, batteries because there's a lot of demand. So why? Because batteries are used to store energy. Okay, so these are the wide classification of batteries. So you can see that it started from these batteries in the modern technology. It started with lead acid battery way back in early 19th century. It started with lead acid batteries, and you can see the nickel cadmium, nickel metal hydride, lithium ion batteries, lithium phosphate batteries, and currently so a lot of research has been going on lithium polymer battery. So so if you see that from one to another, so there is a lot of research carried on that to improve the storage capacity. You can see here, so lithium-ion batteries has the highest energy density, so it can store more energy to weight, to the volume of the material. So, and Now, few of the things my colleague Nikila will be sharing.
Good evening to one and all present here. I would like to talk about Agastya Samhita and Agastya's method of making battery. Among this course of Samhitas, one of the fascinating Samhita is Agastya Samhita, which is supposed to be authored by sage Agastya. And the Samhitas are a collection of hymns or mantras of the Vedas, most of which sing the praises of one or the other several gods or goddesses. In the ancient and modern Sanskrit literature has a copious references to this sage, and he was the son of Urvashi, the divine nymph, and was born in Himalayas. He is given the highest rank among the hierarchy of sages in the mythologies of the countries such as Java, Sumatra, Kampuchea, and Borneo Island. It appears that sage Agastya also has written about the manufacturing of photovoltaic cells, the description of which speaks of ancient thoughts on science. Agastya Samhita, written around 5000 BCE, describes the method of making dry electric cell and the electroplating process. Consider the Sanskrit verse written by Maharshi Agastya around 7000 years ago, which states that Sanstapya mrunmaye patre tambrapatram susamspritam chadye chikiggrivena chardrarbihi kastam sabbuhi dastalashto nidattavyaha padracha sistaha Sayogat Jayate Tejo Mitra Varuna Sangitam, which explains the method of making battery. A clean copper plate is put in an earthen vessel. It is covered first by the copper sulfate solution and then with moist sawdust. After that, mercury amalgated zinc sheet is put on the top of an energy with the twin name of Mitra Varuna, so that the water will be split by this current into Prana Vayu, that is oxygen, and Udana Vayu, hydrogen. Mitra, which refers to cathode, and Varuna is anode. Thank you.
Yeah, so this is that ancient battery which was made by our Indians, and you can see the simple setup of that. It is made with this, whatever my colleague has shared. This is a portrait of that. So you can see that earthen pot in that. So there are layers. So initially you can see that bottom there is a copper sulfate, and on top of that there is a copper plate, and we have a sawdust there, moist, it is filled with water, and you can see that on top of that zinc amalgam, so, and steel spacer also on top of that, so it is put in an earthen pot. So basically that spacer is used to decrease the contact so that it gives good contact to the two electrodes. Generally here this basically that copper sulfate, so that is one electrode, and zinc amalgamated, so that is another electrode. And we can see that it is separated by a moist sawdust. It acts as a separator so that it will not short. So this is cathode and anode. So basically, so this is the general, setup of the ancient battery. This how, and it can generate mostly around 1 volts. So just, and if you see this modern technology, as I already said, so Daniel cell, it was invented in early 19th century. So basically this is the setup of that. It consists of two electrolytes. You can see here that is zinc sulfate, this is one electrolyte, and another is copper sulfate solution, and they are connected by a salt bridge. You can see that Na2SO4, it is a salt bridge, and there are two electrodes also. So you can see here zinc metal, that is one electrode, and copper metal, that is another electrode, and this is connected by a salt bridge. So this salt bridge is used for movement of the ions. So when we put these electrodes into this electrolyte solution, so this zinc electrode, it acts as anode, and copper, it acts as cathode, copper electrode. And when you put this, so this zinc oxidizes and it generates electrons. And that electrons travels to the external path, you can see there on top of that, and this zinc ions, it goes to the salt bridge. Okay? And so when it goes to the other side, so that it becomes zinc sulfate. Okay? Zinc, when it goes here, it becomes zinc sulfate. So that's how charging takes place. Okay? So that's how charging takes place. And the electrons Yeah, so it travels to the external part and it lights. Okay. So that's the Daniel cell. It was invented in early 19th century. And so, as I already told, so it was advanced, and we are now lithium-ion batteries are playing. Current we are playing with this because it is a very lightest metal and it has very high energy density, and it's the lightest metal. So this gives a lot of charge. So and if you see that the mechanism here also, it's very simple as whatever Daniel cell only. So basically, if you see batteries, they are classified into two types. So one is primary cell and another is secondary cell. So what is this primary cell is where charging takes place, and we cannot recharge that. Okay, we can use it, charge it once only, and the discharge is application. Whereas the secondary batteries, they are rechargeable. Okay, that's none other than lithium-ion rechargeable batteries. Whatever the Daniel cell, it is a primary cell. This lithium-ion batteries, so it's a rechargeable. So how it takes place? This is also very simple. It consists of cathode. The functional elements here are cathode, anode, and there is an electrolyte, and there is also a separator here. So which will eliminate the contact between cathode and anode. So you can see here this graphite. So it's nothing but it's an anode. And you can see there the other portion, it is LiMO2. It's nothing but lithium metal oxide. Generally, the cathodes are made of lithium transition metal oxides, whereas the anodes, they are made of graphite structure. It is highly amorphous, and it is here graphite. So how here charging and discharging takes place? This is a secondary battery. How this charging discharging takes place is, you can see here animated one. So this is how. So when you charge this, the lithium. So for example, lithium cobalt oxide is one such lithium transition metal oxide. So when you charge that, the lithium ions travel from cathode to anode. You can see that the lithium ions, so it's traveling from cathode to anode, and whereas during discharge, you can see here, the electrons travels to the external part, and that's how the discharge takes place, and it can light that. Okay, the electricity will be developed. So this is the mechanism, and this is Swage lock cell. What is this Swage lock is? It is just battery assembly only. So if you see that there will be cathode, anode, we have to assemble in a closed container, because these lithium-ion rechargeable batteries, they are electrolytic cell. It's made of organic things, so it will easily, oxidize. It can degrade. So that's why we put in a cell. So it is a closed container, Swage lock cell we call. So here also same only. There will be a cathode, anode. You can see here. So there this copper electrode and the copper sulfate. It acts as a cathode, and there will be a sawdust, whatever the ancient, we have shown the pot, earthen pot, no? Similar only, but it's in a closed container. Okay. So the system is different because we give here good contact also between cathode and anode. Here you can see that. So that copper sulfate, it acts as a cathode, and there is also moist sawdust and zinc amalgam, so that acts as an anode. And we use here gasket and spacer to give a good contact to this, and it is sealed by screws. And so we have made that ancient whatever the battery in a different sealing. That's a Swage lock cell, and this is the performance of that. You can see here it's a voltage versus time profile. So these are carried, and you can see the voltage. So we have got initial voltage of nearly mostly 1.13 volts. You can see there. So this is a voltage versus time profile, and it gives the charge capacity. You can slide, and you can see the capacity versus the cycle index. So nearly it is 25 cycles. We're able to get some capacity. So you can see the profile there. And this is the discharge capacity. As I said, this is a rechargeable battery. And further, in addition to this, we also did some simulation also. It's a DFT based calculation, DFT density functional theory based calculation. You can see for this ancient battery. So, and you can see that that's the left side. So it's the structure of mercury, Hg6. And the space group is P6. And the free energy of that is 0.6 electron volt. And so when we charge this, so because when we charge this amalgamated zinc, So it goes to the, the other side of that zinc, and it becomes Hg6Zn. So we did some calculation and we tried to optimize the structure so that the energy should be minimum. And we tried to, you can see that is the left side, it is Hg6, and we tried to put zinc so to make the energy minimum. And you can see that yellow color portion, so it's nothing but zinc. And still we are working on that, and we will be figuring out what space group it is. And the energy we got through that is 1.4 electron volts. So, and these are the reactions involved. OCV is an open circuit voltage calculation. So generally, as I already said, so there are two reactions takes place from the cathode side and anode side. So they are nothing but called as oxidation and reduction. Okay, oxidation takes place at the anode side, and reduction takes place at the cathode side. And you can see the half cell reaction. So Zn gives rise to, it gives, oxidation takes place and it gives out electrons. And the down you can see that the next reaction, so there reduction takes place and it becomes copper. Okay? And this is the overall reaction, Zn plus Cu2 plus, Zn plus 2Cu2 plus, it gives whatever Zn2 plus and copper. And this delta G and this Nernst equation, and we try to calculate the free energy through this. So where N is number of electrons travel, and that is Faraday constant, and D is EMF. And this EMF of the overall cell reaction is nothing but reduction minus oxidation. So, and we got around it as 1.13 volts. And these are our conclusions, advantages before that. So in ancient times they did not know that it can be rechargeable. So we have figured out that it can be rechargeable. So that's what so it can be used as secondary battery. Okay. And another is, so when we use this, when we see this, whatever this current lithium-ion rechargeable batteries, so dendrites are formed in that. So you can see here, so when the lithium goes from cathode to anode side, so because there is an electrolyte also in that, and there is some reaction takes place, and you can see the tree-like structure, it is nothing but dendrites. So this forms the lithium-ion rechargeable batteries, whereas in our case, it is not forming. Okay, so that's one more advantage. Okay, because in our case we have used zinc amalgamated one, so it is like in a liquid form only. So it doesn't form any. We are not even using any organic electrolyte also. Okay, we are using sawdust as separator there, electrolyte system. So that is another advantage. So we will not get any dendrite formation, because the consequence of this dendrite formation is it can pierce to a separator and it can short. Okay, so that's the disadvantage of that. Though it gives very high energy density, after some few cycles it forms this and this tree-like structure, and it will pierce into the separator and it can short. Okay, this is a disadvantage of that. This we are overcoming by our whatever this ancient technology. And can give high charging, discharging also. So we showed only 25 cycles. Still we are working on that. It can give good capacity, and it also has superior kinetics and transportation properties. Okay? And another is continuous creation and annihilation of electrons upon charging and discharging. So these are the advantages of our our zinc amalgamated ancient battery. And this is we would like to acknowledge Professor Sudipta Ghosh and of Metallurgy Department, who was through us, and also Professor Veni Madhav Adyan. He is also professor at Cryogenic Center, IIT Kharagpur, who was with us. And these are our references. And thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, now topic is open for discussion.
One question: how do you know that ancient Indians didn't know that it can be used as secondary battery? Is there any evidence of that?
Actually, we didn't find any. Maybe there. Actually, we are not sure about that. Maybe I like to change my. We are not sure about that. Maybe.
You said the free energy was 1.4 electron, 1.4 minus 0.6 electron.
Yeah.
So did you get that much when you measured?
Yeah. They have showed no.
No,
Ah.
1.4 was with zinc,
Yeah.
the structure. 0.6 was only Pb.
0.6 was only with.
0.6 electron volts was Pb.
Yeah.
So 1.4 minus 0.6 you would have obtained, right? 1.5 minus 0.6. So did you obtain 0.9 electron volts?
I guess.
You have to calculate through that, you calculate this one. From Dg you will have to calculate the E value, potential of that. So from that we got around 0.9 something volt, that UCD. But in our case, we use the glass fiber separator also, and we use this
Sawdust
also.
also.
So it's varying with separator to separator. So it depends on many factors. This is the only simulation.
So how much percent did you get? 0.9 is a theoretical mass, right?
Yeah.
So how much did you get?
Percentage we can tell that it's varying actually. It's varying. Simulation base is almost matching, but we cannot tell that it's accurate to one separate place.
I got it. How much did you obtain? How much percentage of the theoretical mass did you obtain?
We can tell 0.9 volt for this thing. This one 0.9 something volt came.
Yeah.
Simulation one. And if you're using glass fiber separator, you're coming up to 0.87 something.
Okay.
And if you're using sawdust, 0.3. So likely the
So glass is actually helping you.
glass fiber actually we use for this lithium ion batteries.
Okay. So it's helping you get the theoretical mass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plus
What?
7,000 years before on this, like 5,000.
Yeah, 5,000 years before, I mean BC. Whereas this Daniel cell, the principle, more or less it looks same, two electrolytic cells. This was invented early 19th century. Which one? We have got from surfing, I mean, yeah, slow down. Yeah.
Yes.
It can be two sides also. Yeah. Yeah.
So they form SPA. It's called SPA. What are the SPA is called it's like solid and liquid both because the reaction takes place because of the potential gap. Like some potential gap. The action mechanism is basically whatever the electrolyte is there. It reduces and forms a thin layer of electrolyte. It's basically solid state electrolyte and dynamically collecting and electron. But other side it won't form SPA. It's called SPA.
Any more questions? Okay, if no questions are there, I think we thank the speakers.
Thank
for their
you.
wonderful presentation. Our next speaker is Mr. Apan Haldar. He will be speaking on the next speaker is Dheeraj Dubey. He will be speaking on concepts without physical counterparts in science and spirituality. Dheeraj.
In science and spirituality, and how do I change the slides? Yes. Okay. Fine. अच्छा, ठीक है. So this has been the trend in our scientific discoveries. Like we started off by inquiring about basic. About basic phenomena that we see around us, like falling of the objects and flowing of water, and while changing states of matter we have the entire matter to be constant in quantity. So we inquired in that way and we gathered lot of knowledge, and that knowledge inspired us to towards expanding our view and becoming a bit skeptic about the other aspects of nature, like the bigger aspects like revolution of planets and the most basically planetary systems, things like that. And parallelly we also tried contemplating the nature of matter by inquiring into the subtle realm, like subtle nature, like the nature of atoms and molecules. And it is that point when we met with certain concepts for which we didn't have any physical counterpart, but those were required for propagating our theories. So we call them mystic concepts. So this is one of the concepts that we had been exploiting for past 500 years. It is square root of -1. It started off by Italian mathematician Cardano, when he wanted to find the roots of cubic equation, and it was confirmed in 1560 by Bomelli. He had these two propositions regarding under root of -1, that is I, even though it is irrational and non-real, we end up getting its square as rational and real, and there were many other rules for operating with I given by Bomelli, which later on confirmed the existence, which confirmed the formula given by Cardano regarding the cubic roots. These were some of the quotes regarding imaginary numbers. Some mathematicians used to call it amphibian being, between being and non-being, existent and non-existent, and some used to treat it as necessary constituents, but still they used to maintain that these are imaginary and impossible to have in reality. Like there is no physical counterpart. We have 1 minus 1, but it's very difficult to accommodate I minus I in our three-dimensional space. How it is essential, we can realize that when we try solving equations in these particular branches, especially quantum mechanics, no quantum mechanical model can be described without using under root of -1. Like be it the matrix mechanics given by Born or Jordan, or the Poisson bracket given by Dirac, or the path integral approach formulated by Feynman. All of these entirely depend on under root of -1. But still we don't understand what its mathematical significance, physical counterpart for it. And this is another concept that we exploited for 100 years, and previously we used to deal with Newtonian mechanics, and it had this displacement of a particle, and the displacement of particle was described by Newtonian. It evolved according to the Newtonian laws of motion, and when this quantum era arrived, we replaced that with this quantity called psi, or wave function, and that was the equation according to which it evolved was Schrodinger's wave equation. And this psi actually gave us this picture, which actually forced us to have both the nature for the particle. Like it has to be a particle for the matter. It has to be particle, and it also has to be a wave at a very small scale. And that's why some of the scientists even coined this word called wavicle. It's neither a particle nor a wave, it's both. So they called it wavicle. And this also allowed us to pave in certain radical thought process in our scientific approach. And like previously we could not replace this local order, like we could not think of action at a distance, but this quantum mechanics allowed us to have non-local phenomena. And also we did not have any phenomena like faster than light, but we still don't have any material particle moving faster than light. What goes faster than light is a circulation of energy in the wave that is trapped in the wave of the particle, which is again imaginary. So the concept remains imaginary, but we have some explanation given by it. And also this deterministic processes was deterministic description was replaced by probabilistic description, and this in turn paved in for the way for mind-like property for the matter. Change. And consequently, still in the quantum era, we discovered this fourth quantum number. It was not actually predicted by or required by Schrodinger's equation, but it was inferred from this experiment, Stern-Gerlach experiment. And initially we tried giving it some physical picture. We tried to picturize electron as a simple particle having some finite radius rotating, but when some scientists tried to doing some calculations with it, with some plausible estimation of radius, they found the velocity at the surface of the electron to be exceeding the light's velocity. So that was rejected, and ultimately they ended up with this description. They told that this angular momentum is because of the circulation of energy, and spin is because of the circulation of charge in the wave field of the electron. There is no electron rotating, there is no particle rotating. They ascribed that to the phenomenon of wave, and again we end up with a wave which was itself an imaginary quantity. So again we have an imaginary description describing a certain experimental data. So in this way, till now we saw the reductionistic approach adopted by scientists, and we ended up with certain concepts which were mystical and were difficult to find physical counterpart for. In the meantime, we had a parallel school of Western philosophers who were trying to give some shape for the this scientific for the progress of this scientific discovery. So basically we talked about mystic concept, but we don't know what still don't know what is concept. This was the opinion of philosophers. So what how they described concept is that suppose we have different kinds of trees. So we extract we extract all the similarities of the tree and we put it into a single picture. So that is how they describe a concept. Concept is basically an abstraction or generalization from an experience or the result of transformation of existing ideas. There are many trees existing with certain features. We put all the similarities in a single picture and we try to conceptualize it. We try to develop a general model for all the trees. How it helps us? It helps us in getting a deeper, a higher level thinking regarding this concept. And they also tried categorizing these concepts into three types, like mental representation. Mental representation is basically any concept which we have, but it is subjective. We might have a concept about, like suppose if I ask someone to plot e to power x or think about e to power x, the graph of e to power x. So we can definitely have some idea. We can definitely plot it on paper, but it will be slightly different for different people. The exactness of the e to power x graph will appear when we try to find it according to the mathematical equations, and that is where it fits. The e to power x graph exactly fits in the abstract concept. It does not fit in our mental picture. and abilities are again some concepts which we develop by our sensory perception. That's it. So Roger Penrose tried to picturize this thing into these three different worlds. Platonic world was basically consisting of all the mathematical ideas that we have. Like we have circle. A circle exists in Platonic world. In real life, we cannot. In physical world, we cannot have an exact circle. We can have a very large numbered polygon, but we cannot have exact circle. We cannot have a tangent touching a circle at exactly one point, but mathematically it is possible. So that concept, mathematical concept of circle touching a line and similar mathematical concepts were placed in Platonic world. Basically what we mean by Platonic world is that it has an objective reality, like the theorem or any mathematical concept we propose, it has an objective reality. Whether we find it or not, it doesn't depend on the person who is discovering it. Even before the person discovers it, it exists in mathematics. So that that kind of existence is assigned to that entity in the mathematical world. And mental world, we have many thought processes going in our mind. Like we have emotions, we have this processes of thinking, feeling, and willing. But a very small part of our mental world is responsible for the entire mathematical or Platonic world, and very small part of our physical world, like only our brain can give rise to all the mental activities. So very small part of the physical world is responsible for the entire mental world. And similarly, very small part of mathematics has been incorporated in our research. They have done lot of things like abstract algebra, abstract geometry, everything, but all those mathematical concepts do not find any use in our physics or any other subject which we try to describe mathematically. So he is basically a social scientist, David James. He tried to picturize our current style of academic research and he had this very beautiful allegory of iceberg. He compared our research work with an iceberg in the ocean. Like a very small part of the iceberg is exposed to us. Might be around 10 to 12% of the iceberg is exposed to us, and that he likes to call it as methods. The methods which we use in our research. And apart from that methods, we also have certain discussions over which method we should employ in our research work. So all that arguments related to those methods are called methodology. It is just below the ocean surface. That means we can make out when a person does something in our academic research, we can make out something what he has, what kind of methodology he has used, and what arguments he has used, and what kind of biases he has used for adopting a particular method. But there are these two kinds of knowledge about the research work: epistemology and ontology. Epistemology is basically study of knowledge, like what can be said as knowing. Like we know biologically, we know our body. Biologists have discovered a lot in biology, but all those knowledge do not define our identity. We cannot say which part of our body is responsible for our identity. So that these kinds of questions are basically dealt in epistemology. And there is an ontology, like what kind of things actually exist, like what kind of entity can be ascribed what kind of existence. Like we have this idea of concept, whether it is real or imaginary, or in which realm is it existing. Like we had that Penrose triangle. So this is our Vedic perspective. Even the philosophers in the Western philosophers used to deal with this problem of mind and matter, and But even before 10,000 years ago, we were the Vedic scholars were were knowing this concept of mind and body division. So they have these elements which go to make up our entire environment, and even our bodies are made up of these. The bodies which the biologists study are made up of this, basically these 5 elements: earth, air, water, 5 elements, air and ether. And beyond that, there is a subtle realm which we have, in which we have mind, intelligence, and false ego. Mind basically carries out the process of thinking, feeling, and willing, and intelligence carries out the process of determination and discrimination, and ego is again our some sort of mental part which is responsible for our identity. So how do we look in this picture? How do we look in this picture? So this is a particular person can be described in this method. There is an Annamaya Kosh which is made up of 5 elements, and even the outer realm, the objects which we see around or we study in our scientific realm, are basically dealing with only those 5 elements. And this Pranamaya Kosh acts as an intermediate between the mind and matter. And these 2 levels, Manomaya and Vijnanamaya Kosh, these include our intellectual and egoistic part. And finally, we have this Anandamaya Kosh. Basically, Anandamaya Kosh and soul are not different, and Vedic scholars had this approach of going from trying to understand nature from the soul, and then going to grosser realm. But in modern science, we see that we are starting from the grosser realm, and we are trying to approach this subtle realm, and in the process we are getting lost. So basically we saw in this presentation 3 schools of thought. One was reductionistic thought of school, where we start from the gross realm, and one was of the Western philosophers, and this third one is the Vedantic picture given by Vedic scholars. If we try to accumulate all these descriptions in a picture, I think so we will be able to get a better picture in our scientific research. That's it. Thank you.
Any questions from the audience? Can take one.
So you have this 5 gross elements, 3 subtle elements, and the center you have projected as soul. Okay.
Yeah.
So where it goes, whether it is in between subtle and gross, or above the subtle.
No, it's above subtle. It is even subtler than mind and intelligence.
But somewhere it is measured, you can measure that the soul dimension is the 1 of 10,000 of the tip of the ear. So how it is as subtle then?
Yeah.
If it is dimension, you can measure this 1 by 10,000 of the tip of the ear.
Yeah.
Then how it will be subtle?
It is subtle in the sense it has a parallel existence. It might have that dimension, but we cannot in our gross realm we cannot have that experience. Whenever we talk about a concept having a subtle, like like in Penrose picture, we have a mathematical world, we have a mental world. So the concepts which are there in Platonic world, we don't see them in real world. So why not accept that these concepts are also there? It is required in our picture. Our picture is still incomplete because of them. Without them,
Then what is the role of soul?
it is responsible for the activation of the other.
Where it acts? Where in between that it acts? This gross and subtle, where it acts?
Actually, that would require me to go a bit deeper. I cannot answer right now.
Any more questions?
So how anger, memory like that is ego like that?
This ego part and anger, the feeling part is already included in the mental realm, mind, and identity aspect is in false ego. That is what the Vedic picture says, Vedantic picture.
No more questions, sir. Let us thank the speakers for their wonderful presentation.
You can go.
There is a third speaker supposed to be here. Is there? Dr. M. Narasimha Rao, is he there? M. Narasimha Rao? Okay, if he's not there, then I think this session ends here.
I hope the young minds have enlightened us enough. I request now Dr. Hare Krishna Mohanta to please present the mementos to the speakers. The first speaker was Devashish Naik, Ashutosh Agarwal, Janki Raman. Please come forward. The next speaker was Mr. Dheeraj Dubey. Now I request Mr. Pawan to please present the memento to Dr. Hare Krishna Mohan. We will be proceeding for our next session in Kalidas Auditorium. Thank you.